Everyone is familiar with the Titanic. The ship has been represented in numerous movies and documentaries till now. But her two sister ships, the Olympic and the Britannic, get a lot less attention. In this video, let's see some interesting facts about the Olympic. The story of the Olympic is not as tragic as the Titanic or the Britannic, but it's definitely eventful. RMS Olympic was the older sister of the Titanic. The concept of both ships was drafted at the same time, but construction of the Olympic started 3 months prior to the construction of the Titanic. Both the ships had the same dimensions, however the Titanic was considered the largest ship in her time owing to her higher gross tonnage. Olympic's maiden voyage in 1911 was captained by Edward John Smith, the same captain who would later take charge of the ill-fated maiden voyage of the Titanic in the following year and perish in the disaster. Olympic was a White Star Line ship. In a third voyage, an observer working for the Cunard Line, which was the rival of the White Star Line, was on board the Olympic in search of ideas for the Cunard ship Aquitania, which was under construction. HMS Hawke was a British cruiser that was passing by the Olympic when she was on her way to New York from Southampton. As the two ships passed each other, Hawke was drawn towards the Olympic by a combination of water displacement and propeller suction. Hawke's helm ran into the Olympic on the port side and left a 42-foot gash in the Olympic, flooding 2 watertight compartments. The Hawke's bow was badly damaged in the incident. Olympic went back to Southampton and later returned to Belfast, where she was laid for 3 months for the hull to be repaired. This also caused delays in the construction of the Titanic. Olympic lost a propeller blade in March 1912 while returning from New York. She returned to Belfast and the men working on the Titanic were transferred to the Olympic to repair the blade. That delayed Titanic's maiden voyage to April 10, 1912. The two ships were laid next to each other at the same dock, and that was the last time when both the ships were together. John Jacob Astor, one of the richest men in the world at that time, along with his wife Madeline, once traveled by the Olympic. They both would later board the Titanic for their return journey to New York, where J.J. Astor would not survive the disaster. Titanic hit the iceberg on the night of 14th April 1914, just before midnight. Olympic was around 500 miles away from the Titanic when she got the distress call from a sister ship. Captain Herbert Haddock, upon hearing the news, raced towards the Titanic, reaching a record speed of 23 knots. But the Olympic would not reach the Titanic in time. Olympic received the last message from Titanic at 1:50 a.m. By 2:20 a.m., Titanic was under the waters of the Atlantic. Carpathia reached the scene of the disaster sooner and was able to rescue the 705 survivors of the Titanic. Captain Haddock offered to accept the survivors of the Titanic on the Olympic, but Captain Rostrom of Carpathia refused, saying that it would be unwise to have a vessel identical to the Titanic to be on the scene after everything the survivors went through that night. Carpathia returned to New York with the survivors. After the Titanic sinking disaster, 44 additional lifeboats were added to the Olympic, a double hull was created inside the ship, and some of the watertight bulkheads were extended all the way to B deck. Olympic played a role in the transport of troops in the First World War. She rescued 200 of the crew of the sinking British battleship HMS Audacious. She transported troops to various locations throughout the war. At one point, she also had 4.7-inch guns mounted on her. She was also painted in dazzle camouflage in the war, which made it difficult for the enemy ships to determine her size, speed, and her direction. After the United States joined the war, she also transported American troops to war. In 1916, the Olympic was supposed to transport troops all the way to India via the Cape of Good Hope. However, it was decided that the ship with its coal bunkers would not have the capacity to make a journey of that distance at a reasonable speed. Probably the most heroic chapter of the ship happened in May 1918 when Olympics commanding officer spotted a German U-boat surfacing. He immediately opened fire at the submarine and turned the ship to ram the U-boat. The U-boat did an emergency crash dive and resurfaced parallel to the Olympic and was preparing to torpedo the Olympic, but couldn't because of some technical difficulties. Olympic again turned and rammed the U-boat, shoving the boat in the path of Olympic's port propeller, which sliced into the boat and breached its hull. Olympic did not stop to pick the survivors and continued on its way. After the war, the Olympic carried a lot of famous passengers in a lifetime. Charlie Chaplin and Prince Edward being two of the most notable personalities. 1921 was the peak of Olympic's career when she transported a record 38,000 passengers in that year. She remained a popular and fashionable ship during the 1920s, especially for the first class. One of the main attractions was that the ship was similar to the Titanic, and sailing on Olympic was a way to vicariously experience a voyage of Titanic. Changes in the United States immigration policies in the 1920s greatly reduced the number of immigrants trying to settle there. And that was the start of the end for the Olympic. The final blow was the Great Depression, after which the number of passengers dropped over time. In 1933, Olympic carried only 125 passengers on her first voyage of that year from New York to Southampton, her lowest ever. In May 1934, on her way to New York, Olympic collided with Nantucket, a lightship near the New York harbor. Olympic was cruising at just 10 knots due to heavy fog conditions and went down to 3 knots upon hearing sirens from the lightship. Upon noticing the ship, the engines were put in reverse, but it was too late and the Olympic ultimately collided with the lightship. The lightship sank so quickly that there wasn't enough time to lower the lifeboats, and the survivors were holding on to the wreckage of the ship. 2 of Olympic's lifeboats were lowered to search for survivors. Out of a crew of 11, only 7 survived, including the captain. 3 of the 7 survivors also died later. Olympic was retired from service after her final voyage from New York to Britain on 5th April 1935. She was scheduled to be demolished in 1937 in Southampton, and she stood along with the Mauretania in the scrapyard, who was her biggest rival in her career. Fittings of the Olympic were auctioned off before she was sent to the scrapyard for dismantling. Collectors purchased numerous items from the Olympic, and they are highly sought after today. The most notable mention would be the White Swan Hotel in Britannic, England. The hotel possesses interior decorations from the ship, including a portion of the first-class staircase, which by the way is not to be confused with the grand staircase, then a revolving door of the first-class restaurant, a marble fireplace, wall panels, and numerous other decorative items. One could say that scrapping of the Olympic was sort of a closure for both of her sister ships, Titanic and Britannic, who never got the chance to retire properly. Olympic was the only ship out of 3 ships of her class that was truly successful and made it all the way to her retirement. The Titanic sank on her maiden voyage after hitting an iceberg, and the Britannic sank on her 6th voyage after hitting a German naval mine in the First World War. Olympic became well known as the Old Reliable after her role in the movement of troops in the First World War. By the time of her retirement, Olympic had completed 257 round trips across the Atlantic, transporting 430,000 passengers on her commercial voyages and traveling 1.8 million miles in her glorious 26 years of service. While the Titanic was referred to as being unsinkable, that tag was truly justified by the Olympic. She survived a war and numerous life-threatening collisions and mishaps throughout her career. And that's all about the Olympic. If you liked the video, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and thank you for watching.